Hey everyone, thank you for watching. Today I'm going to show you how to draw an acorn. So grab your pencils and let's get drawing. The first thing you want to do is draw the outline or the shape of the acorn. An acorn typically has a bottom part that will kind of resemble something like this, and a top part that's kind of like a crown that kind of sits like somewhat like this. So we're going to fix that up, don't worry. So the crown of the acorn sits at the top, and the bottom obviously sits below. So a lot of times the acorn is attached with a stem, so we'll just draw a stem over there as well. We'll fix that up a bit later too. Okay, so we're going to refine this, so follow along. But if you didn't know, there's so many actually different various shapes and sizes of acorns. This is the most common shape and size of an acorn. Acorns typically fall from mature oak trees. So the oak tree is typically where the acorn falls from. An oak tree that's typically 70 to 80 years old can produce thousands of acorns in a year, so believe it or not. I'm just going to darken up the outer lines here, and I'm just going to make sure that there is a nice shape to it. The acorn isn't necessarily round at the base, but it does have a slightly rounded shape to it. The other thing that you'll want to note is that it doesn't really come to a point at the bottom. You kind of need to go a bit wider, so don't be afraid to stay wide with that. So before it was a little too pointy there. That's why I fixed that, okay? So keep that in mind. So by the way, I'm going to walk you through the entire tutorial here with shading and lines and editing and adjusting. We don't claim to do anything perfect over here on this channel. So if you're following along and drawing, by all means, please feel free to practice or pause or do what you need to make sure it comes out as you wish, okay? So we kind of drew the bottom part of the shape, and what I'm going to do is just try to fix up some of this top part. Now, the key to the top is that unlike the bottom that is very uniform in how it is, how it comes together, the top is a little more random. So that if that was the bottom and has very clear and distinct lines to it, the top is actually a little more random. So if you kind of notice, I'm going to draw this in a way that's just a little more scattered and attach it to the stem. And that's exactly in real life what a real life acorn actually resembles. So I did draw a line there. I'm just going to erase it because I want to just kind of redraw some of the outer part. And it's supposed to be a bit natural and not a straight line. So I'm also going to erase this line over here. And I'm actually going to come back over here and just kind of create this kind of realistic crown or top of it, okay? If you have the top of the acorn like that, right over here, and I'm actually going to switch to 7, actually I'll switch to an 8. Right underneath, because this top part protrudes up higher, outer, larger than the base, I'm actually going to put a little bit of shadow and shading below. Just the slightest little bit of shadow and shading over here. Okay. Same right here, actually more over here where this little indentation is. Great. So notice I'm just drawing some downward lines as well. In a second, I'm going to smudge that out and try to make it look a little smoother, but certainly wanted to put some shading lines as a starting point, okay? Notice too that at the edges, I'm also trying to curve some of the lines. So I'm also trying to curve some of the lines as well, because you'll see shortly we're going to want these lines to curve as well. Okay, so if we're happy with that so far, I'm just going to use my finger and just kind of smudge in some of this shading. I think it'll look really nice once it's in. And I'm actually going to go back after I finish and just darken up the top part of it as well. But we'll do that later. For now, I'll just touch up just a little bit over here, okay? So just trying to create some shadow and shading over there. I'm gonna jump back to my 5B, and what I'm gonna do now is actually just draw some of the base here as well. So if you didn't know, acorns are actually a real strong source of food for wildlife. So actually a lot of wildlife rely on acorns for food. You might see a lot of chipmunks and other animals, you know, trying to, you know, get into some acorns and nibbling on them. So if you've ever seen an animal kind of nibbling on a food, it might be an acorn. Of course, there's lots of other foods that they might nibble on as well. So typically an acorn does have lines that kind of goes down and also has some curvature to those lines as well. Because we are creating a somewhat of a 3D effect to this acorn as well. So we kind of want this to resemble a 3D looking acorn, okay? On the topic of food, acorns are actually very high in carbohydrates as well. So I don't know if you knew that. There's sometimes a little nub at the bottom. So you can actually draw a little nub that sits over there. Okay, and the other thing is that they don't have to be perfect at the bottom. Sometimes an acorn can also have a bit of a protrusion or something like that. So I want to make sure that we show you that that's possible and that's perfectly fine to do that. So we'll try to make sure that this looks realistic with the curvature of those lines. Notice how I kind of start at this point and kind of get it going curvy at the sides like that. That gives it that realistic look as well. We're going to draw a light source from over here. So we'll do some more shading on the left. Just a motion that's up, down, and keep it going with your curvature of your line. Every line is going to have a slightly curvier line as you go away to the sides, okay? So if you keep that in mind, you'll continue to draw these nice lines on the base of your acorn. Use your smudging technique. I use my finger. It's a nice simple way to kind of keep this, keep the pencil lead blending into each other. You can see how nice that looks, and we can continue to do more lines there as well. Okay. So we've done some of the shading to the bottom, but I think we want to work on the top as well. The top is tricky. The reason that the top is tricky is because it is very much a bit of a scattered and kind of random piece of the acorn. I'm gonna fix up the stem just a touch, and I kind of like having my stems pretty straight and uniform. I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of create a proper stem that way. The line I had before was a little all over the place, wasn't it? So the stem might continue over here, kind of go like that. Okay, we'll fix that up as well. Yeah, let's grab the 7B. And what we'll do is we'll just draw just some curvature to this as well. We're going to go darker at the bottom of the stem to give it the effect and the illusion of, you know, being somewhat of a 3D piece, right? We'll add some more shading at the top with the 3B. So notice we're using different pencil types to really create that shading effect, okay? Okay. I'm just going to clean up some of the smudging that was that kind of went over the stem. All you have to do is kind of carefully approach the stem and don't erase the stem, obviously. So just carefully back and forth like that. All right, so we'll just kind of lean over here and just kind of clean this up as well. All right. The top is the trickiest part. The reason it's so tricky is because you kind of have all of these little nubs and these little kind of growths that kind of grow in a kind of not exactly circular, but kind of this curvy kind of like pattern. So what I would say is lightly add some lines like that, smudge it out, and then continue down underneath there as well. So you can add some shadow and shading below, because what we're really doing here is we're creating somewhat of a 3D effect below this as well. And then again, we're going to kind of go like that, okay? The other interesting thing about the acorn is that there's some smaller ones like this. So you can kind of start to kind of put together some of these little patterns around the top of this acorn, right? I think they typically get smaller as you go towards the bottom. So down here, they're a lot smaller, and you might notice that as well. So what you want to do is smudge it out. And work on your shading as well. The shading is interesting because we said the light source is over here, so you definitely want to go darker on the left. Smudge it out, and just repeat till you're happy with the level of shading over there. Just keep it going, okay? The top is also darker than the bottom, so we're really going to make sure that the top has more lead and more ink, more lead on it, more darker tones on it. So in doing so, we're going to keep this shading going. Have some patience. If you're following along and you're drawing at the same time as us, you can pause this video if you need to catch up, or you can rewind it if you feel like you're at a point where you're not really following along at the same pace. So don't be afraid to do that. The other thing to note is that this top piece is not a perfectly or close to smooth round. The bottom is smooth and round. Notice the lines here are very smooth. We're gonna fix that up to the bottom. The top does not have the same smoothness to the lines, to the shape. So I'm actually gonna make this part darker. So we kind of have this ridge that's darker over here. That's why this kind of area is darker, and over here, we're also just gonna continue some shading down below. So the best way to do that is follow your line that you created and just draw your strokes away from it. Take your time. So we're going to use our smudging technique again. Notice how the top now looks like it's a bit more rugged and natural, and by having some of these darker bands, it actually does create a bit of a sense of realism. And notice those squiggly lines don't look as fake anymore. Before, they were just standing out like a sore thumb, weren't they? So, so doing this really helps. I'm going to switch up pencils and move over to the 8, just to kind of get some additional help with my shading. Before I was using this 7B. Okay. Notice the curvature of these lines that I'm doing. Similar to down below, I'm creating a sense of curvature as this top part protrudes out the top. Part is rugged, remember. This bottom part is pretty natural and rugged. I want that represented with this drawing, so I just redrew that. Okay, and I'm also just gonna make sure that below there we do have some good shading. I want that shading there, and I'm just gonna do that by just getting a little bit of shadows and shading right below it as well. Great. See how that's coming together? Just like I did my up and down lines, I want my side to side lines to have a sense of curvature as well. So notice how I'm doing that. You should do the same. You should create that sense of 3D effect by creating these lines like that, okay? Great. So I'm gonna jump back over to we'll use the 7B again, and I'm just gonna make sure that some of the shading around this side in particular is really well represented throughout the base of the acorn. And it's because that line was standing out too much. It was kind of like a sore thumb just popping out on the side, and I didn't want it to look like it was out of place, so I want to create some more shading over here as well. Okay. Same on the left side as well. Let's make sure we get a lot of dark tones on the left side. That is where our shadows are. Our light source is coming from the right, after all. I was using a 7, I'm gonna go back to an 8, and just ensure that that nice, rich, dark part of the acorn is showing up well. And it's looking pretty good in my opinion over here. So I'm gonna smudge it out just a little bit more and continue to add some more shadows over here. Let us know in the comments how you're doing. Are you drawing the exact same? Are you drawing a different acorn? Or maybe you're just following along and just want to watch a drawing to come together. That's great as well. But let us know. We're always curious as well. We're curious to know, how you're watching, or why you're watching, or what the benefit is. But we also want to just hear from you as well. We want to know if you're enjoying the videos. We hope that you like and subscribe to the channel. I think at this point we have over 1,000 videos. If you're watching this video in the far future, hopefully we're at 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000. I know that we have goals to make a lot of videos for you, so right now we're at 1,000, so we're pretty happy with that. You can search anything in our channel, throughout our channel, and see a wide array of drawings. Okay, so you can kind of see how that shadowing and shading is coming together on this side. I'm just going to clean this up just a little bit more. Just like we did at the base down here, I want to have the shadowing up here a bit darker. So I'm actually going to create some darker lines at the top. So the top of this acorn will also be darker. And I want that to be representative of a realistic light source on the right and the dark shadows that would exist on the left side. Because the shape of the top is different than the base, you shouldn't have the exact same gradient at the bottom as you do up here. I'm actually going to have a bit more of a darker and extended gradient at the top. To try to create a sense that, hey, the top is actually a different piece altogether. If you're not sure what I mean by gradient, it's just gradient is a term if you're going, let's say, from dark to light. The gradient is the range that you would go from going from a very light stroke to a very dark stroke. So that's what I would mean by gradient. So here, your gradient goes from dark to light. So that's what I mean by gradient. Don't be afraid to get a little random and scattered when you draw the top of the acorn. It is, by definition and in nature, a bit of a random top as compared to the bottom. The bottom is a lot more structured and smooth. The top is definitely more kind of wild and free-ranging, so don't be afraid to experiment with that as well. So you can kind of see this starting to come together. I think the last thing that I'm going to do is maybe grab something like a 3B, and I'm just going to redraw some of the outer lines and just make sure that it's very clear in terms of the separation from the outer to the acorn drawing as well. So in doing so, I'm just going to smooth out some of the sides. We've done this on a lot of our other drawings as well, so this shouldn't be anything new to you. Okay. And it's always nice to kind of clean up some of the smudging that ran to the side of the acorn or the drawing or the object. So I'm just going to erase some of this extra excess lead from the shading. Okay. The last thing I would say that you should do in finishing off this drawing is clearly have some lines, because a real acorn does have these lines that go down, and it is nice to kind of show off some of these lines as well. So I guess the very, very last thing is just finishing up this stem. It's just a stem, but it's an important part of the drawing. So let's just make sure that we have the right shading in there as well. So that looks a little bit better. Finish that up over here. And just give it a final smudge. I would say that's it. I would say that's basically how you would draw an acorn. So hopefully you enjoyed that, enjoyed the facts and the whole process. The last little tidbit that I'll give you of information is that, believe it or not, people's last name is actually, some people have the last name Acorn, which is kind of cool. In the United States, 262 people have the last name Acorn as of the last time I looked that up. So kind of cool. So hopefully you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.